This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horrors, share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff, repping the 80s.
I'm Ryan, repping the 90s.
This week, we're putting up our spooks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Halloween! The goblins and ghosts of our souls take flight, henceforth to alight in one frightening fight between two contenders whose malodorous might do promise to make this one devilish night. In this corner of cobwebs and clocks, tales from the Darkside, and the challenger facing the ghoul hard knocks, the adventures of Pete and Pete. Open your sacks, cause here comes Put Up Your Spooks!
This week's theme...
Halloween. My episode is a Tales from the Darkside classic, Season 2, Episode 5, Halloween Candy. This episode was directed by Tom Savini, and it has a very straightforward set and plot.
Yeah, for being directed by Tom Savini, it's fairly non-gross and non-effectsy.
It gets effectsy towards the end. We start with an old man in a neck brace, in a chair, smoking butts. And his son is fussing, trying to get him to eat healthy food. All this old man can think about is that it's Halloween night, and he hates it. He hates Halloween, and he refuses to give out candy.
I hate Halloween. Last year they played tricks. Last year they soaked my windows. They put toilet paper in my trees.
That's because you didn't give them any Halloween candy.
You have no right to expect any candy.
The son is like, you gotta hand out candy. If you don't, bad things are gonna happen. And the dad is like, you're telling me they climb into my windows these days to try to frighten me.
Maybe he has dementia.
He's like, if you don't like it, you can come and stay with me. He's like, no, I gotta stay here and watch the house. They'll burn the house down if I'm not here. And the son is like, fine. I bought Halloween candy. I put it in a bowl by the door. When they knock, give them what they want. If you don't give these kids what they want, you deserve anything and everything that they do. In fact...
I remember one year, Mrs. Clausen, she didn't give out any candy. We sheared her poodle.
So it's like, wow, this is a tough neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
These kids mean business.
A tough, lovely suburb.
And the dad's like, they just ring my doorbell all the time, and I don't like it, and I don't want to get up. The son is like,
Mother always gave them Halloween candy.
Your mother's dead. I'm not your mother.
and then he's like, that old mean lady across the street died. I guess that makes me the meanest person on the block. I hate Halloween. And the son is like,
I gotta get back to work.
Lock the windows.
What for?
I want those kids trying to sneak in the house. That's what they do nowadays. Sneak in the house and scare you if you don't give them candy.
Then give them the candy.
it's like, oh, dang, dude. It's like 8 o'clock on Halloween night, and this kid is in a suit and tie, and he's heading back to the office.
Wow.
And he's like, all right, Dad, I'll be back tomorrow with groceries, with breakfast. Just hand out the candy, or else. And the dad's like, okay. Cut to a kid in a white rabbit costume is knocking on the door. Old man comes to the door, and he's like,
I don't have any candy, and I wouldn't give you any if I did.
immediately, this little rabbit dives into his bag, pulls out a can of spray paint, and the old man is like, oh, no, you don't. I've already called the cops. Get out of here. Doorbell rings. It's a clown. The old man is like, you skedaddle too, or I'll step on you. So he's now taken to physically threatening these kids to get off his damn stoop. Doorbell rings. It's a little kid dressed as the devil. And the old man is like, you want candy, eh? So he grabs the candy that his son has left him, mixes it up with honey, Elmer's glue, and mayonnaise to make goblin candy. And then he pours the slime into the little devil's bag. And he's like, have some goblin candy. So that totally bums out the little devil. And he has some peace. He can go inside, fall asleep in his chair. But hours later, he is rudely awoken by the grating doorbell.
Go to hell, you little monster. Go to hell.
A small figure with a deep, sinister voice says,
Trick or treat.
No. You're not getting any candy. It's too late. Don't have any left. I gave it all away. Never had any to begin with.
Trick or treat.
Go away.
Trick or treat.
Go away.
Trick or treat.
So then the little guy kicks down the door. It is a goblin, a troll-style goblin. And when the goblin grabs a piece of candy, the old man shoves him. And this just sends the goblin diving into a back handspring. And he flies up, crouching tiger, hidden dragon style, onto the porch railing. The old man's watch breaks in the fracas. He shuts the door. He's done with all this candy and trick-or-treating nonsense. But then he sees a squirming sack on the floor that bursts open and fills his apartment with roaches. He tries to make a phone call, but the only thing that will come out is the time, which is moving awfully slowly since this goblin broke his watch. The old man gets hungry, but so do the roaches. They're all in his food. They're all over everything. So he opts for a tall glass of roaches instead. Gross. The doorbell blares. The goblin is back, and this time it power bombs the old man to the floor, shattering his fragile skull. When his doting, dutiful son returns in the morning with groceries, he finds his father dead. Not only dead, but emaciated. And when the police arrive, they tell him to lawyer up because this is a clear-cut case of senior abuse and neglect. The end.
If you take it at face value, you kind of have to assume that the old man was just taken outside of time for like several weeks, because we know that the son was planning to come back the very next day.
And when the watch broke, the phone kept saying the time is midnight. And it was like midnight.
The wall clock also froze at midnight. And when the cops were there, they were like, he hasn't eaten anything but Halloween candy for weeks. One thing that I just figured out while you were doing the synopsis was that I think the old man definitely has dementia, because one of the symptoms in patients with dementia is that they start getting super paranoid and they think everyone's coming for them. So I'm thinking, like, what if the guy... Because we know he didn't have any food in his fridge, really. What if the old man literally just hasn't been eating for weeks and doesn't even realize it, and that's why he's hungry all the time? Because one of the things I had a problem with was, in the very beginning of the episode, he says, I'm always hungry. I'm always hungry. Then when he wakes up in the time warp, he's like, oh, I'm so hungry. I feel like I haven't eaten in weeks. But in the beginning, the son is like, you're eating like a pig. You're eating all the time. What if he thinks he's eating all the time, and the reason he's so hungry is because he's forgetting to eat, and the son is maybe too busy to notice? I feel like if you really want to look deep and like try to think of an actual metaphor behind this episode, like perhaps I'm giving it too much credit, but that actually kind of tracks for me.
I think that all tracks. Unfortunately, I think you're doing way too much work to make the episode coherent.
Maybe.
I think what it is that they had the old man dead of starvation at the end because he got caught in that time loop, so they had to set up the fact that he was hungry. I initially took that as that he was just achingly lonely. And he's like, there's nothing to do around here but eat.
Yeah.
And he's like, bring some waffles in the morning, bring this, bring that. The son would know if his father was forgetting to eat or hallucinating food. So there's a few threads to follow here. One is that the monster is the same monster from Creepshow that's inside the crate. The Tasmanian Devil.
I thought I recognized that stinking monster.
Also in Creepshow, there's a segment about a mean, miserly old man who gets trapped in like a futuristic apartment full of roaches.
Huh.
And all his food is full of roaches.
That's interesting. So they're just recycling stories.
They're just recycling stories. We covered a different episode of Tales from the Darkside. It was the Trick or Treat episode with the old man who was lording the debt over the town.
Halloween! I was going to say it reminded me very much of that, except the opposite. He loved Halloween.
Except the opposite, because that was like a horrible old man who got his comeuppance because he was abusing Halloween to torment kids and make people miserable. Whereas in this episode, I think we are supposed to hate this old man just because he's old and miserable without considering the fact that he is a widower, he lives alone, he's in a neck brace. These kids are admitted terrorists. His own son was like, yeah, we shaved the neighbor's dog, we slashed up their garden hose. That little kid in the rabbit costume went right to the spray paint and was going to tag his house. Everything he said bore out. Like, it was not paranoia. The kids on that street were berserk. What I will say, I think a big part of his problem with Halloween is that he has the worst doorbell in the history of doorbells. And if there was a night where that sound was just constantly going off, I would understand. I get that the old man is miserly, but also it's sad. It's a sad story. He's a sad figure. He's not like a rich guy. I mean, he's in a neck brace.
We never find out why.
Every time he's got to get up out of that chair like he's in pain. I feel like they were trying so hard to make me hate this old man, and I just didn't. I just felt sad for him.
Well, that makes one of us.
I hate Halloween.
My episode, one that I've been waiting to do for years on our show, The Adventures of Pete and Pete, Halloweeny.
Once a year, like the leaves, it comes. A magical night when bedtimes disappear and identities change.
Trick or treat!
When the ghouls and goblins of our souls are set free to roam the night and scarf candy.
It's Devil's Night in Wellsville, and the Petes are preparing for Halloween. Little Pete is very excited. Big Pete, not so much.
Halloween is for Halloweenies.
Little Pete specifically wants to break the candy collecting record of 374 houses in one night. His friend Nona, who you may recognize from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, is
A young Michelle Trachtenberg.
going to help him since Big Pete quit trick-or-treating. Crossing guard Frank Gulcher tells them that if they can't stop a gang of troublemakers called the Pumpkin Eaters...
This is, our last Halloween.
Also, I really like Little Pete's jack-o'-lantern because he pipes in smoke from behind.
Yeah, classic Jurassic style jack-o'-lantern. The pumpkin work in this episode is immaculate, but more on that later.
They must have had a whole department. Big Pete is glad Halloween is being canceled. He's sick of the whole thing. He and his friend Ellen are walking home when they find an alley full of smashed pumpkins. And Pete smashes the only intact one. Gets a little thrill, but then feels a little weird about it. They both kind of do, so they go on home. The Pumpkin Eaters, led by Endless Mike, see him smash the pumpkin and wonder if they can tempt him to the dark side. The Pumpkin Eaters run amok on Devil's Night. They smash Pete's pumpkin and they cover him and Nona in shaving cream.
But I couldn't help feeling like I was to blame for what happened, as if the Halloween gods had cursed Pete for the pumpkin I destroyed.
Because of this, Nona's dad, Iggy Pop, forbids her from going trick-or-treating because it's just way too dangerous. So Little Pete, not having a partner, is gonna quit because you can't break that record by yourself. But Big Pete steps up and agrees to trick-or-treat.
I know what this is about. So you smashed a pumpkin. Is that worth ruining your life?
I think you're being a little dramatic.
Dramatic. I'll give you dramatic. I got 2 words for you.
Ellen, don't.
Ned Richmond.
She reminds him about the town phoebe, Ned Richmond, who, a year previous, went trick-or-treating at the age of 15, was destroyed by the Pumpkin Eaters, and ruined socially, probably for life.
I was surprised and delighted to see the word phoebe making another appearance.
But, Pete can't be swayed, so him and Little Pete suit up in their astronaut costumes, into which Little Pete can pee freely, and head out on the town. They trick-or-treat like crazy, and actually Big Pete gets kind of into it. He's like, yeah, let's fucking break this record. I don't mind it. Meanwhile, the Pumpkin Eaters are tearing up the town, so the Petes take evasive action, serpentining this way and that way all around the suburbs, not taking a direct route. But all the houses in town start shutting down in fear of the Pumpkin Eaters, and it threatens the record, but luckily, many of them devise new clever ways to hand out candy. The Petes are getting very close to their goal, and Pete is feeling pretty good until they trick-or-treat at Ned Richmond's house. He recognizes Big Pete, and he goes, "Hey, Wriggles, maybe you and I can go trick-or-treating next year." By then, he would be 17, which is just crazy even for me. And Big Pete is like,
Wriggles. He called me Wriggles.
he's like, maybe I'll find someone else to go trick-or-treating with you, but there's no one left on the streets. It's a complete ghost town. So he just abandons Little Pete in the middle of the street all alone, and Little Pete goes off to break the record by himself. Big Pete is immediately ambushed by Pumpkin Eaters, and a chase ensues, finally ending at the town's Halloween haunted house. I had to say Halloween haunted house because if I had just said haunted house, it may have insinuated that there's a genuine haunted house in town, and there isn't.
There's a really funny scene where the Pumpkin Eaters are just tearing up the town, stalking him, pulling 6 stunts on their dirt bikes.
Oh yeah, they're
like
jumping into
flying
pools
through the air.
Yeah.
And it's that thing where the teenager's running and he jumps over a fence into a yard. There's a big dog there, so he runs and jumps back, but the Pumpkin Eaters are there. So he straddles the fence and runs along it, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon style.
Incredible stuff. The Pumpkin Eaters find Big Pete in the haunted house, and they're trying to draw him to their side. And Little Pete can hear all this through the two-way radio in their space helmets.
Smash the pumpkin and together we'll toast the death of Halloween!
And if I don't, 2 words. Ned Richmond.
He's furious because he knows he has to go and help his brother, but he's 1 house away from breaking the record. But right will out, so Endless Mike wants Pete to smash a pumpkin, but in the end, Big Pete really does want Halloween to live, and he smashes it on Mike's head. The Pumpkin Eaters are about to pound Pete, while Little Pete and Frank Gulcher, the crossing guard, show up. Little Pete blasts Mike in the face with a sack of candy, then straddles him and headbutts him. And unfortunately, it kind of knocks him out cold. And then Little Pete is in trouble, but Big Pete smashes another pumpkin onto Endless Mike's head, trapping his face inside said pumpkin.
No more pumpkin!
And the villains get their comeuppance, and the brothers head off into the night.
We helped save Halloween in Wellsville. Now, every year, when the leaves come, so does Halloween. Setting free the ghouls and goblins of our souls for one magical night. Especially for 2 brothers who will always believe.
I thought of something that I never thought of before. The Pumpkin Eaters really, really want to kill Halloween, but if they kill Halloween, then their fun is over. They can't go crazy on Devil's Night and Halloween Night.
I had a similar note, which is the Pumpkin Eaters claim to hate Halloween, but they wear carved pumpkins on their heads, and they dress up and they run amok on Mischief Night and Halloween. Like, it seems like they're the biggest fans of Halloween.
Yeah, seriously.
Just the old school Halloween.
They're just a fan of anarchy, I guess.
But I agree. You would think that they would be invested in making sure that there's always a night where people put pumpkins out and little Phoebes self-identify in the streets and are easy pickings. So, did you catch this when it first aired?
Oh, I'm sure I did, yeah.
And how many times have you watched it since?
Many, many times. At least once a Halloween.
What did you think of the 2 different portrayals of Halloween haters in these 2 episodes?
I mean, the Pumpkin Eaters are a lot more fun, that's for sure.
That's true.
I suppose.
And they can do rad stunts on their dirt
They
bikes.
can do, yeah, BMX stunts. I suppose the old crotchety man is a bit more realistic. Well, I don't know. I mean, kids love smashing shit, as evidenced in both episodes. But they don't generally wear gigantic pumpkins on their head. And if you tried to wear an actual pumpkin, carved out or not, that's a lot of weight to be carrying around on your head.
So many scenes in Pete and Pete had pumpkins on screen. The Pumpkin Eaters had like signature masks that they carved out of pumpkins.
Mm-hmm.
And they wore multiple times. There was that alleyway that was completely splattered with pumpkin shells. And they did this really funny thing where when there would be certain moments of a heightened tension or emotion, they would pop in a bunch of pumpkins around the character, and the pumpkins had different expressions. And it was like a comic book framing, but they were using the pumpkins like emojis. Mm-hmm. It was so visually exciting. It was so awesome every time that would happen. And at one point, the pumpkins like have flames shooting out of their like eyes and mouths and stuff. It was so cool.
They don't usually get that like overlay heavy on the show, but the particular director. So there's a commentary for this episode, and they talk about how this particular director,
Peter, wanted to make cinematic masterpieces.
It was beyond cinematic. It almost felt like a comic book. Every scene and every sequence was so inventive and creative. You know, just down to, you know, Little Pete's fog spewing pumpkin, or the crossing guard's siren hat, the astronaut costumes. There was so much going on. It felt like a really long episode because it was so packed full of stuff, but it was only like 20-something minutes. Whereas my episode was 20 minutes and there was like just nothing to it. I almost couldn't summarize it because there was nothing there.
It happens a lot with those 80s ones.
I was very, very happy to have Pete and Pete back on the show.
Bite my scab!
So why did Big Pete start hating Halloween?
He's just growing up.
But he wasn't like, yeah, I'm over it. He's like, I hate Halloween.
Yeah,
and I hope it ends.
Maybe he's just...
Was it all just because that Phoebe got humiliated?
I don't think so. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons he gave up trick-or-treating. He can't necessarily decide if he hates it or if he... Because when he, like, fully commits to hating it, he like pulls back afterwards, and he's like, whoa, that didn't feel quite right.
His initial posture is that he hates it, and he kind of hopes that the pumpkin eaters will continue to run amok and the town will cancel Halloween and he can just wash his hands of it. But when he does get his hands dirty and he smashes that pumpkin, he does feel wrong.
Yeah.
Pretty good script writing to have Little Pete one house away from his record and having to choose between, his goal and the brother that abandoned him and who he told, like, screw off, I'll do it without you.
Yeah, well, Little Pete is a hero. Could have done that one last house though, and then gone to help out. Might have been too late, I suppose.
Not with that much urine in his suit.
Yeah. The amazing thing about the show is that it was their first show. They worked in the promo department at Nickelodeon, and then they created the show, and it's like they just knocked it out of the park on their first try.
I was secretly hoping that the garbage man would show up.
Yeah, just that one episode. He never shows up again.
Lightning in a bottle, man.
This is, our last Halloween.
Body count for Tales from the Darkside, 1. Body count for Pete and Pete,
0.
Scare factor for Tales from the Darkside. It got a little freaky towards the end where they were like cutting in those almost subliminal flashes of dead faces and glowing white goblin eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Scare factor for Pete and Pete.
I don't think it was very scary, and nor was it meant to be. Although there's one really great part where he's in the haunted house, and there are all these pumpkin-headed dummies everywhere, and so like he's knocking them around, and then he knocks one around, and it turns out to be an actual pumpkin eater. Except that you see the pumpkin eater step into frame, so you're kind of aware of what's going on. But other than that, scare factor very low.
Gross factor for Tales from the Darkside. You've got goblin
you got roaches,
candy.
You got goblin candy.
You got roaches. You have emaciated corpses covered in roaches.
Gross enough.
Pretty gross. Gross factor for Pete and Pete.
Oh, pretty low.
He peed in his astronaut
he did
costume.
Pee in his astronaut costume.
But I guess that's scientifically accurate, so I can't really dock him for that. Or award him a point for gross factor. What the factor, Tales from the Darkside? I'm going to say it's medium, just because for me, I couldn't understand why they were trying to make us hate this sad, lonely old man so much and villainize him. What the factor for Pete and Pete?
I think it was pretty low, as these things go.
Tales from the Darkside, tit for tat, wins on every factor, but now we come to the important, perhaps the deciding factor, Halloween factor. Which of these episodes had the higher Halloween factor?
I would say Pete and Pete without question, because you're out on the town, everything's decorated, everyone's in costume, you got pumpkins, you got candy, you got trick-or-treaters, you even have teepee and shaving creams.
For the sheer volume of pumpkins, pound for pound, I would give it to Pete and Pete, but also...
And they shot it outside in New Jersey in the autumn.
It's not just set outside in that perfect autumnal twilight, but you have trick-or-treating as a challenge. Who can trick-or-treat at the most houses? And who am I going to get to trick-or-treat with me? And there are these villains out to stop Halloween. Halloween's going to be canceled. So really, really leaning into it and all the different aspects of it. So yeah, I would say that Pete and Pete blows this one out of the water. I concede. I'm giving this one to Pete and Pete. I just love the creativity on display. There's so much production value, and it's not the production value of money. It's the production value of
effort,
wild imagination and effort and creativity and problem solving. And even in the story, you know, everyone is afraid to hand out candy, and so they find other ways to sneak candy out to the kids. I love that part. Yeah, just an amazing show, amazing episode. It definitely raised my spirits and got me excited for Halloween. seems like Ryan has been disemboweled by one or all of the cats. I'll pause the recording again.